Okay, let's see if this works. Yeah. Hi everyone, and welcome so much to this, the last talk of the first day of the Jfokus conference, if you don't count yesterday. Uh, and this talk is called Hack the Accessibility Crisis with me, Andrea Berglund. And I want to start this talk with a very, very short experiment. Okay, so half of you, everyone on this side, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes for a few seconds. No peeking and no falling asleep. I know it's late. And you guys, just keep your eyes open. I will soon ask you to open the eyes again. Okay, everyone can open their eyes. Okay, so who here, raise of hands, know where the nearest emergency exit are? Pretty many people here also. But okay, who here knows what happened to the spider? Not everyone here, though. That's exciting. And lastly, who knows where the JavaScript developer went? Fine, nice. Okay, so you on this side of the room, did you feel equally informed and equally included in what just happened? No, not really, maybe. And just in the spirit of inclusion, I'm just going to show you what you missed. So first, I asked everyone to just take a second and see where the nearest emergency exit are. They are very good lit here, so I can understand why none of you guys missed it. And next, it's this meme of a girl who's sort of overkilled the spider. And lastly, we have the IT clan who's luring all the JavaScript developers with new frameworks. So, and the point I'm trying to make is that how many people, this is how many people experience the web today. Like that you are forgotten and that you miss out on both like this, the silly stuff, but also the really important things like, for example, this is an image of the Swedish Public Health Agency's website during the pandemic. The page informs about how to slow down the COVID contagion, but the text in the middle, that's the blue background and the white font, is not actually coded as an HTML list with heading. It is an image. So citizens with visual impairments who might need to use a screen reader had no way to access this content and to receive this information. So this was an accessibility bug, and it was found and addressed by accessibility champion that's called Per Axbom. And this led to that the Public Health Agency added the content in pure HTML underneath. And that's great. But here is another interesting fact. It wasn't the person with an impairment who found the issue. I mean, it's very hard to know that you are in fact missing something if you don't know that you really are missing something. And in this case, it was a UX designer and accessibility specialist who found the issue. But he is just another co-creator of the web. So if you are one of us who works on building websites and front-end applications, welcome to the crisis. You are very needed. So, who am I? And my name is Andrea Berglund, and I'm from the north part of Sweden, Umeå, and I'm a developer and accessibility specialist from the consultant company Omegapoint. And I've been working with accessibility since 2015, on and off, but I really got into the nitty-gritty details of this topic when I worked for about 3 years at the Swedish tax agency's design system. There I verified the accessibility of all of their UI components and also had the privilege to coach teams on how to be more accessible. And just so you know, this presentation and a bunch of useful links are uploaded to my GitHub, and I will give you a link to these resources in the end of the presentation. So let's give this talk a little bit of structure. So what I want to talk about is I want to give you a very short introduction to accessibility. And then we're going to look at some common accessibility errors and how we can find them and how we can fix them. And lastly, I will go through a couple of ways that you can incorporate accessibility into your team's workflow depending on the size of the team and the organization you work in, and also the abilities in your team. So, did you know that around 20% of the world population have some sort of disability? It can be permanent, something that you are born with, or that you got in an accident or by illness. It can also be temporary, like when you went skiing and you broke your arm, or if you have laser surgery to fix some sort of eye deficiency. And it can also be situational, like if you're carrying heavy groceries, you might suddenly get the same needs as someone with only one arm. And if we were to define digital accessibility, which is the type of accessibility that I will talk about, it can be described as the inclusive practice of ensuring there are no barriers that prevent interaction with or access to digital services, like websites, mobile apps, or documents by people with or without disabilities. But another way to understand accessibility is to reflect upon that the world is perceived, it's understood, and it's operated in a bunch of different ways. I mean, we can perceive it pretty much how we would like to perceive it, and we sometimes perceive just a fraction of what is around us. And from what we have become aware of, we also understand things a bit differently. We can draw different conclusions from the information we have got. And I'm not sure if you remember this, but when the Lord of the Ring movies came out, there was a discussion about the type of relationship that Frodo and Samwise Gamgee really had. And people draw a bit different conclusions from those movies. And lastly, in the end, we choose what we want to do with the information that we have gathered, how to operate the world. And perceivable, understandable, and operable are all very important concepts when it comes to accessibility and the interfaces to the systems that we build. And I mean, we build systems for all types of people who perceive the world different from ourselves and have drawn different conclusions from what they've seen, and then chosen to act from what they think they know about the stuff they've learned. But what does that mean for us developers? That we build websites for, I mean, everyone from our own grandmother to some meme guy. And the author of the book Calm Technology, Amber Case, was the ending keynote here at Jfokus at 2018. And she said, a person's primary task should not be computing, but being human. And I fully agree. We need to enable people to be human in this digital era. And that involves building accessible applications. So, let's look at some common accessibility errors and how we can fix them. And just so you know, I will start from the WebAIM Million project. WebAIM is a leading expert on digital accessibility, and they have a project where they scan 1 million of the world's most common web pages for accessibility issues. And last year they found 49,991,225 errors on these pages. And these are errors that can be found by like automation tools, which usually can find around 40% of all the accessibility errors on a web page. So in reality, you can probably double this number. And the errors can be sorted into different categories. The most common one is the low context text. And then we have missing alternative texts, empty links, missing form labels, empty buttons, and missing document language. And now I want to go through them one at a time. So, give me a sec. Okay. I usually like do this kind of talk with sites that I have some sort of relationship to. So I only like try to find things that I either use or are part of in some way. And this is a very funny story. I've done this talk in a couple other conferences. And I've used this page because Avanza is a very large like investment banking thing here in Sweden. And they have a very high profile design podcast and so forth. And yeah, we'll come to that. But they have changed. They have changed their UI, and I will show how in very shortly. But this is and this is a funny example. But surely I just wanted to sort of take a minute to let everyone just follow what I did here. To find this kind of accessibility errors, like I said, they are found with automatic tools. Most of these tools use like the same library in the end of. So which tool you choose doesn't really matter. I will today choose Lighthouse because it's a part of Chrome, and that's my like preferred browser for the moment. So it's just easy. You open the developer tools and you can find it there. And then if you go to the Lighthouse report, you can sort of, yeah, you have different options here. But if you choose like navigation, and you can choose if you want to be mobile or desktop, and then you can click in the accessibility checkbox. And then you get some sort of automatic scanning. So let's look at what we get when we do this. And what were we looking for? Do you remember? What was the most important error? Yes, and low contrast text. So you get a score from this sort of very quick overview. And we can have that we have some issues here. Is it visible for you guys in the back? Yeah, great. And the first one here is that background and foreground colors does not have a sufficient contrast ratio. And so I can open this error, and then I can see that which are the elements that are failing. And for now, we can see that, okay, this is this, like the search field here. It's sök in Swedish. I'm sorry, you English-speaking people here, but it's a search field. But just a couple of months ago, the Avanza's main like action button was not accessible. It had it's followed their design system probably, and they have like this primary mint green color. And previously, when you did this type of automated scanning in this page, it would fail. And I mean, for a primary button to fail, I would think that is bad. But like you saw now, they have fixed it. So their new sort of primary button, they have darkened the background, so the color contrast ratio is now fixed. And thereby no accessibility error. And the other fun part is when I've been doing this now for a couple of years, is that I usually then like, okay, but what do you do if you're having a deficiency of some sort and you want to sort of get all your money into an investment bank? What do you do? Yeah, but you search for alternatives, right? If you can't like access the web page that the first competitor is having, you go to the next one. So if you then look to a competitor here in Sweden, it's called Nordnet, which is another sort of investment bank. And they actually made their website worse from an accessibility point of view because they have this moving image and a moving video background. And if I have some sort of HDAD or other like deficiency with cognitive behaviors, this is really, really annoying. And I have no way to like stop it. I cannot like, there's no pause button anywhere. Which is very funny because like a year ago, the Nordnet was like winning the accessibility champion sort of contest, but now Avanza is taking over. So we'll see in a year from now. Ooh. Yeah, so that's fun. Okay, so that was sort of contrast ratio. And another sort of way how you can fix it and how you can look at it is that you can, if we close this for now, this is very small for you guys, but there are different sort of developer Chrome extensions that you can get that are often very good. And here you can sort of see, it will also do some sort of analysis here regarding, as you can also see, maybe here that the contrast ratio for this search field is not sufficient. And here you also get the sort of indication of which level of the WCAG conformance you need to. And I will talk more about that later, so you can just hold that thought. Do you have a question? Not that I know of. I mean, there are sort of other sort of extensions that you can make this very high contrast, like overall for everything on the page. If we have time, I can show it, but not that I've heard of, at least. Yeah, and here, I mean, here you get the live editor. So here you could at least sort of, I mean, you could sort of maybe, okay, but we have this other color here. Okay, no, I could not do this pipette thingy. I thought I could, but I just click on the button. Never mind. You could sort of fetch other colors. So you could, if you have a color palette in your design system or in your style guidelines or anything, you can sort of find other colors and maybe give a suggestion. That's probably not maybe something that most of us as developers do, but it's a possibility. Yeah, and like I said, it's also you can also see down here that you can have like this small and large font size. So another way to fix this is to actually also like increase the font size of the text. So sometimes the contrast can be good enough if the text is big enough. So that's also something to bear in mind. Yeah, okay. Does anyone remember the next, second to last? Mostly common error? No? Yes, correct. Missing alternative text. And here we're going to, like I said, I'm from Omegapoint. We have, like many consultant agencies, a job career site. And we have thought a bit about accessibility, but like we see here, image elements does not have all attributes. And then we have some images that are sort of, usually you get down here, but I think don't think any of our images have alt texts. And okay, they are mostly there for some sort of ambience that we want to sort of portray, and like what are the like words, like value words we want to be associated with our brand. Like, so okay, fine, maybe it's not the most important image out there, but still, I mean, it's for us users with sites, it's there. And it's part of our brand. Why shouldn't it be there for everybody? And another sort of comparison that's fun to do, because like I said, how we did find this? Yeah, we found this again with the lighthouse scanning. I didn't perform the scan because it takes, sometimes it takes a couple of seconds, and I mean, your time is valuable. And to fixing it then, yeah, you have an alt attribute in your HTML on the image tag, so you need to write some useful content there, right? And what is useful content? Yeah, that's another talk almost. But I want to sort of show, because in Sweden at least, and in the European Union, the regulations are becoming more harder to follow, maybe, or this is something that's becoming at least a topic of the agendas higher up in the corporate. So you sort of get different sort of strategies on how you should handle this type of issues. And I want to sort of compare to news sites. So here we have a Swedish one that's called Dagens Nyheter, which is like today's news in Swedish. And if we look at the accessibility score here, we can see that, okay, 95% accessibility, you have some issues, but we see that there are no issues regarding the images. So the ultimate, like the images should be good, right? This is, I mean, it should be great. But then if we sort of go to and start looking at the HTML and at the actual DOM tree, we can see that we have the image, fine. But we also see here that we have another sort of accessibility specific attribute that's like aria hidden equals true. And this means that for all assistive technologies that we scan this page and give the information on the page to user who needs it, it will be hidden. So for if you're using this site with the screen reader, you will not have any images at all. So, I mean, that's one way to do it, but shouldn't there be better ways? So if we instead look at Al Jazeera, which is a much larger like news corporation, mainly in the Arabic-speaking countries, but they report on all world news. We can see here also that they have 100% accessibility score if you do it with Lighthouse, which is, I mean, awesome. But if we then look at the images, what are like their strategy for this? And here we can see that we have an image tag, but the image tag has an old text that is then Russian representative of UN, Vasily Nebensia. And you also have this, you have the image in a figure element, and we get caption, which allows you to write more extensive about this image, because alt texts are usually, they are there for to be quite short, like a tweet or slightly under a tweet. But if you want, in here, you maybe want to see like where did you get this image also, and then you can use this instead. And I mean, from a user perspective, this is much better, right? If I were not, like, if I had one day, probably maybe when I get some, if I get some sort of illness and my site is going to go downhill, I still want to be able to access all the content and get all the information that everybody else gets. So just to show you a bit different sort of strategies on how you can sort of fulfill these requirements. Yeah, okay, the third one then, empty links and empty buttons. Oh no, I forgot to take this a page up already. We'll see if it takes forever to load. We'll see. So this is a site for booking hotels. And I know this take a bit of time, so I'll just start the Lighthouse process. And it takes a couple of seconds to just go through everything. And I mean, this process takes more time the more content you have, of course. And the thing that we are looking for are like empty links and empty buttons. They are often divided into different sort of bars because they are different. But for me, I think they are quite similar because they all have to do with like, you don't know what you are going to. If you're clicking a button, what does this button do? If you're clicking a link, where will like end up? Where does this link lead? And I will also show a bit more code regarding this a bit later. In the meanwhile, while this is loading, okay, just because I said that it was already done. Okay, so here you have both the buttons, which does not have accessible names. And this button, I don't even know where it is, so I will skip it. It's somewhere here, so we don't know what this button do. But the more important thing here that I think is quite weird is that if you look to hotels.com, you probably want to travel, right? And like most of us, we might know where we want to go. But sometimes you might go to these kind of pages to get inspired, like, are there like any deals somewhere that I should know about? Like which countries, which cities are having some sort of fun event or whatever. So of course they have this sort of inspiration sort of cards on their front page. Discover the trendy destinations. But if you were to visit this page with some sort of assistive technology, you wouldn't know what to do. You will get like, discover this trendy destination, and then it would be link, link, and another link. And if you scroll to the side, we will have another link. But where will we go? So none of these are sort of, they don't have any accessible names, which is weird. Oh, and anyway, and that sort of takes us a bit to our code. Because I have a couple of, I created a very, very, very bad page here. I'm a developer, I'm not a designer. And this is my very, very fine testing page. And as you can see, I have some sort of blog here. I want to do stuff, and then I have two sort of pages. I have a home page, and then I have some contact link. And the only thing that sort of are describing what these are icons, and icons that are fairly used. So many of us will associate them with different sort of, like we are going to like a specific side part of a homepage. But if we will go to the contact here, and we will see look at that code, we would see that they have no sort of naming. So here we have a nav element with 2 hrefs, and now we have this title element here. So they would actually, if you hover on them, have some sort of name. But title on an href is very seldom a good idea. Other ways we can do this is by writing an ARIA label, or we could actually just write it out with the text instead. So you actually, even though, I mean, if you are a sighted user with some sort of cognitive impairment, this is much easier to understand. Okay, contact, I want to contact this page, and home, I want to go home to this page. It's so much easier. And this would work also for some sort of button. And in this example, I would say it would be fine to sort of hide the image tags because they don't convey any information. But if I didn't have this, if I didn't have the information here, I could then maybe in this image tag have the ARIA label for what I want to say. But I think it's maybe a less, I wouldn't choose it if I had the option, but it's possible. Yeah. And another sort of point with this is that when you see the text here, another like big plus is when you're using a voice interface. Because with the voice interface, you can then like say, click on, go to link, contact, and the sort of tooling there would immediately know which link to go to. While if I had not that, I would probably, they usually also have some sort of grid system, so you can sort of get in some sort of grid mode, and then you have to like grid all the page, grid to like this section, and like it's like if you have seen this like in Blade Runner when they sort of have this inception in someone's eye to see the iris reflection when if you're I don't remember the name for it now, cyborg or not, sort of. It's sort of that sort of technology. You zoom into it and then you can click on it. But in this case, this would be more efficient. So, anywho, the last one then, missing form labels. And here, this is this is interesting because in this project, you have a form and you have an input, and then you just have a button. So it's quite easy to spot that something is missing. If you are very keen, you can see that I have some sort of accessibility lint on also that is going to warn me that this is bad. So what would be the bare minimum then? Okay, I will get, I will get a placeholder, and I cannot spell placeholder, and that will say email. And if I go then here, and if I want to sort of run my automatic tools on this as well, I will not get an error. Not for this at least. I think I might get other errors. Yeah, because of the images. And I have some bad contrast rates down here. But I won't get an error for this one. But to only use placeholders on input elements are a very bad practice. Because what happens when I start writing? I don't have the label anymore. It's gone. And this might be fine for an email if you really hate labels for some reason. But imagine if you're going to enter the social security number and you need a specific formatting, or your postal code, or anything else that requires to start a specific format. You will lose that information, and it will be very hard to, then you have to like remove all the things that you have written, and then like, okay, what was the pattern? And then you have to like rewrite it. So usually to only use a placeholder, it's a very bad, what's it called? Yeah, bad pattern, dark pattern. So you want to use the label element. You can also use ARIA label, but like I said, I like be explicit. And you need to associate the label element with the input element. You can either do this, so you have the label wrapping the input, and then you just can write email, or you can have the label as its own element that is a sibling to the input, but then you need to connect them with the for attribute on the label and the id, an ID attribute on the input. And now it's so much better. Okay, and what was the last one? Does anyone remember the last most common that you can find with these sort of automatic tools? Empty links. Yeah, I sort of grouped them together, but the last one was missing document language. And I actually had to look a bit for this because I did not find many of the pages that I use. So this is my local pizzeria in Umeå. It is very good. It is by Steve Galloway, who nobody knows who it is. I mean, I grew up there, so I know this, but it's so much fun that they still like have his name here. But here you can find it. The HTML element does not have a lang attribute. And this is like, you need to specify like which language is this? Is it Swedish, or is it an English site, or is it a French site, or like what's the language here? So that's the point of it, and that's also for assistive technologies mainly. Yeah, all right, that was it, and now we're going back to presentations. Cool. So, demo, and then we were done with the demo, right? So, I mean, looking at WebAIM's most common errors might not be the most structured way to incorporate accessibility into your team's workflow. So let's look at another couple of ways, a bit more structured ways. And even though I prefer to talk about the people behind the accessibility requirements, there are an important standard that I guess most of you might have heard of, and it's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG. And this is what most of the regulations point to, and therefore the bare minimum of accessibility needed for your sites if you're in a regulated industry. So what is WCAG? And it's old, pretty old, if you're counting on webs, like how fast the web is moving. It's from 1999. The first version came out, and it's maintained by the World Wide Web Consortium. And of course, it has evolved since then. And the second version came out in, I think, 2008. And today we are at the number 2.2. But most of the regulation in the European Union points to the WCAG standard 2.1. And it's been a standard since June of 2018. And this version expanded the content of the 2.0 version. So it did not really change any of the previous content, it just added more. And since version 2, the standard is categorized into 3 levels of conformance in order to meet the needs of different groups and different situations. So we have the like A level, which is the lowest, and then the AA, and then the AAA. And good to know is that the second level has been chosen for most of the regulations. And WCAG is divided into 4 parts: perceivable, operable, and understandable, and robust. And the standard is written as success criteria, so it's able to test. But it's not always easy to interpret the results of these tests. So if you go through all of these criteria, you will find that to meet the regulations that points to WCAG, you have to have a holistic view of the web that you are building. It includes everything from the overall navigation, strategies, and plain language to how to implement a label and an input correctly. So often we need different roles and perspectives from our organization to be able to understand the criteria, and then to, if necessary, change our applications so they will fulfill this standard. And here's like a key takeaway from this talk, that accessibility is teamwork. To make your site fully accessible, you probably need a bunch of people's expertise to like really understand and fulfill the WCAG guidelines. You probably need a decent front-end developer. You might need a UX designer, a copywriter, content manager, someone who can help with all the texts on the page and with like captions and transcripts for videos. And you might need an art director or visual designer to answer all the questions about color contrast. And as you probably figured out, this is not always the reality for us developers. I don't know how many times I've fought just to get like a UX designer as a part-time team member, because I mean, we have all seen how it looks like when developers design interfaces. It is not pretty, and it's not that often very usable. So here comes another takeaway, and that is that you will not always have the preconditions to meet these requirements, like to fully understand what the WCAG standard needs. It's quite sad, but it's true. But you will always be able to do some things, and I will give you some tips from when you are more or less alone in your team to when you are in a slightly larger organization. You might have a team of a handful of people, and lastly, if you are in a larger organization. So let's say that you are in the team of one. I mean, it's maybe not that common, but it is it happens that you, the person who has designed the homepage or the application is also the one building it. And I mean, unless you're some kind of unicorn, you won't be an expert in all the parts of the web. So what are my tips? And the first one is stick to standards. To view content in a browser, you really just need some HTML, some CSS, and sometimes some JavaScript. And I mean, sometimes that's easy to forget, that the web page can actually be just a bunch of static files served by server. You don't need a bunch of build tools or pre-compilers if you don't want to. So if you are uncertain, like on all the different choices that you can make today for modern web applications, it's okay to just stick to the standards, because the standards are accessible and they are accessible by design. And for like assistive technologies like a screen reader or a braille keyboard, the most important standard is the HTML standard. And just like Trump, HTML knows all the words. It has the best words. And this means that like a div element is not a button element. And a div cannot live inside a table body. It will break the HTML contract and screw with the semantics for some screen reader users. And I mean, often when you hear people talk about accessibility, they immediately talk about people using assistive technologies like screen readers, even though like blindness is not the most common disability. And you heard me also talk about it very much today. And that's because this is a developer conference, and the code that we write affects these technologies because they interpret HTML that we write and expects us to know and follow these standards. So please use correct semantics, and it's pretty easy to validate your HTML. Second then, don't get lost in third-party libraries and all the cool frameworks. You don't have to follow the itclown. And I mean, all of the common frameworks are very easy to make accessible, but they often create a bunch of boilerplate code that you might have to adjust or enhance. For example, in a single page application, if you use their like navigation, it's never accessible by default. You have to manually move focus to the new content. Otherwise, like a screen reader won't know that it's there. And of course, this doesn't mean that you have to, you should never use other people's code. But I just want you to be smart about it. And one way to be smart about it is to verify the third-party accessibility. So, for example, a Swedish agency, they had started to use the Material UI as their design system because they thought it was accessible. It's such a large company and that's maintaining it. But when they tested the standard, tested their web page towards the WCAG standards, they realized that Material UI wasn't accessible. So they had to refactor a large chunk of their web. And many third-party templates and libraries have information about accessibility. So usually you can find that information pretty quickly before you sort of choose it and build your entire web on it. And if you're on your own, try to follow established design patterns. Don't try to invent like new cool stuff that no one really knows how to use except you. Another tip, like you saw on my IDE, you can get linting, which is getting information as fast as possible. You can all usually, I think there's at least for React, I know there's another a framework specific linting that also checks accessibility. And like I did, do testing with browser plugins like the Google Lighthouse or similar. You can use the color contrast checker or headings map or validators, and a bunch of these are in the list of resources on my GitHub that you will get soon. And lastly, it's like the most common disability is actually reduced mobility. And that can make it quite hard for some people to use a computer mouse. So one important test to do is to see that your site's functionality work using only while only using the keyboard. So moving between like links and buttons and input fields, and you should be able to do that with the tab key and interact with different kind of elements by using the space, arrow, or enter key keys. Important tip. What else? Yeah, if you don't build the page for yourself, like this is my homepage, please try to get help from your client maybe when it comes to describing the content. He, she, or them probably knows more about the product and the service that you are building, so they can write better copy. Copy on the text, alt text, images, etc. But if you are also sort of the content manager, you can search for like plain language guides. And there are quite useful tips out there to make your language easier to understand by many people. Okay, so now we have moved up in the world. So we are now not the organization of one. We have maybe a couple of colleagues. So let's say that you are in like a medium or small organization. But you don't really have any like centralized function that's giving you and all the teams a like accessibility process to follow. So what are my tips? And like I said, all the things that are valid for like the team of one is of course also valid here. But you might also want to add a bit more organized process. And one example could be like follow a WCAG checklist and test with real users. And the point with creating a bit of structure around this accessibility process is that your company might not always want to be a small to a medium-sized organization. They might want to hire new people to add more functionality faster, and suddenly you have to onboard new people to this sort of accessibility requirements. And then if you have a process that you can follow and that you can build upon, it will be easier. And if the system that you are building suddenly needs to follow regulations, you will already know the strengths and the weaknesses of your system. So you can scale and change the organization securely. And another part of this process should be like a maintenance plan for when you find accessibility bugs, because you will. And I mean, some bugs might be a hinder for a person with a disability, but some might just be annoying. And just like all bugs are not equally important, so prioritize them. And this book has a very, very good sort of template for how you can think about the different kind of severities in the bugs. And it also included in resources. Woo! So I will give you all the clues. And lastly, you are in a large organization, like a company that maybe have both a web application or many web applications. They might have a mobile app or multiple mobile apps. What will you need then? And the most important thing is to sort of get a chief accessibility officer or similar, because one key factor to succeed with accessibility is to get the time to learn about it, to try fixing things, failing, learning, and then maybe fixing them again and getting it right. But this requires that management gives you the time to do this and understands the value that accessibility gives your company. Or at least that they understand the risks with not following regulations. And you might need sort of a function in your organization or a person that can be the beacon of information and coordinate different accessibility initiatives. like a chief accessibility officer or similar. Yeah, and you will probably also need some sort of design system. And I mean, depending on your organization's need, you might not have the capacity to like build and maintain your own design system. You can also use open source or purchase a license to like accessible and maintained design system. For example, the Swedish Unemployment Agency, they have an open source design system that's maintained and accessible. And for example, Vardin, who is one of the sponsors at Jfokus, they also have a design system that's partly open sourced, but to get like the full value of it, you need to purchase a plan. So it sort of depends on your organization. Please also create some sort of company-wide accessibility process and keep it simple. It can be part of the design system or like a complement to it. It can include sort of a VKG checklist, but please also include some sort of how to test with people with disabilities, so we get real user feedback. And lastly, think about reports and how you can prove that your accessibility status and how that process scale. Because you might be audited at some point, which means that you might have to prove how you meet your accessibility requirements. And you can do this by making all teams like fill out the VKG checklist for each system that they are responsible for, and that becomes some sort of like report, I guess. But how does that scale? And if you do that on, like, say, an Excel sheet, how will that Excel sheet be updated? So will this be true for a system in like 3 months or 3 years from now? Could we automate this maybe? And I mean, this is not a simple thing. I don't really have any solid recommendation for this yet. But if you're interested in these kind of questions, I can recommend a talk that was held at last year's accessibility conference, AXCON, with representatives from GitHub, who talked about how they measure themselves with their accessibility scoreboard, which was really, can be a good inspiration. And lastly, remember that accessibility is primarily not about regulations and checklists. It's about people. And statistically, like ourselves at some point in our lives. And to not like forget about this, you can do some sort of empathy exercises in your team. Try to eat lunch blindfolded, or ask a colorblind colleague to guess which color an icon is. Is it red or green? Because you statistically we probably have a colorblind colleague. Or just sit in on a user test with a customer with disabilities. For example, at the Swedish Tax Agency, we asked an acquaintance of ours from the Swedish Association of Visually Impaired to show us how he navigated the web by both computer and by phone. And it was a very popular event. I think we were close to like 100 people on Skype. And it became an eye-opener for a lot of people to see a real user actually trying to like find their information in a table or in a PDF that really wasn't accessible. And also try to make accessibility fun. I mean, you can organize a bug bounty hunt for accessibility errors on your company's website, like where the one finding the most, the worst error gets like a gift card or something. And lastly, like all of us, we need to remember this, the one and only Venkat. Write code to benefit your users and not for your convenience. I mean, we need to take care of your users. So thank you so much. And I think we have time maybe for like one question. Thanks. Yes. I'm not sure. Yeah. They could, but the law would not like allow it later, so it wouldn't really matter. But I mean, it's always sort of a, I mean, people with impairments have I mean, they have tools. They have sort of ways around this. So we have like the requirements from everyday life, and I mean, the more digitalized we do this society, the requirements for people, to the abilities they need to have this to work, it just going hard, like more, it just increases. But they have tools. But the point with accessibility is like we need to sort of also, I mean, the web is very powerful. We have tools. We know this. We can fix these errors. So we need to do our work, and they always do their work with their sort of assistive technologies. And I mean, sometimes when you start looking into all the like the matrix of browsers and disability tools and other things, I mean, sometimes you have to sort of prioritize what is the most common, and then you can sort of make a requirement. Okay, you need to be at the latest version of JAWS, who's the screen reader, or you need to have an updated iOS system, example, to be able to navigate this website or system correctly. So I mean, it's a balance, but in that specific question, when it comes to contrast, it's regulated by law. So I will be around if anyone had other questions. So thank you.